You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported.
Okay, Liam, I want to make a movie about a group of women who are trying to escape a corrupt mental institution. Also, when they dance, they have vividly intense steampunk dreams.
Oh, yeah, cool. And how do those dreams connect to the plot?
The what?
The plot? I have some notes. Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies as suggested by you. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Gregg Beaver.
And today we are talking about Sucker Punch as requested by listener extraordinaire Andrew Craig. Sucker Punch is a film from 2011, and for those who maybe aren't familiar with this film, I'm going to take this opportunity now to offer a content warning for our episode of I Have Some Notes, because this movie deals with themes of sexual assault, violence towards women, and mental health issues. Of course, our conversation is going to involve discussing sexual violence, assault on women, and mental health issues. So if that's not something you want to listen to today, perhaps this is an episode to skip. We'll see you on the next one. So just give that heads up.
Funnily enough, we almost did a much different movie, as voted by the listeners. By a rounding error, we ended up landing on Sucker Punch. But there was a lot of votes for Citizen Kane as well. And I don't know, guys. Like I know that listeners, I'm sure some of you think it would be hilarious to kind of watch us squirm our way through Citizen Kane, or you just legitimately want to hear our opinions on it, which would be fun. But I just don't. I think after we ran this poll, I realized we're not going to do Citizen Kane for the show, at least not as a regular episode. And my reasoning for that, and I don't know how you guys feel, but like it feels like to do something like that, to offer like a script rewrite, would be more on of a video essay type thing. Like maybe ask that of Dan Olson or Lindsay Ellis or something like that. But for us to do sort of like our 1 hour drive-by rewrite or a screenwriter rewrite of Citizen Kane just doesn't seem fair to that movie and its history.
Yeah, no, I actively asked people I know to go vote for Sucker Punch. So like, I can't imagine what
Orson Welles deserves better.
It's rigged. It's rigged.
By people I know, I mean my girlfriend. But I was like, oh shit, Citizen Kane's gonna win. Baby, can you go vote for Sucker Punch? Also, oh my god, I can't believe Sucker Punch is the lesser of these two. But yeah, I don't know what we can say about Citizen Kane, that hasn't already been said. Like it's an almost 80-year-old movie. Like the discourse is sort of over. And also I know who suggested that, and I even question the sort of good faith that suggestion was made. I think it was maybe a little more tongue in cheek than some of the more earnest suggestions. But yeah, so that's, but please, all of you, give us your suggestions in good faith or otherwise, and we'll add them to the list and then, retroactively decide if they're actually appropriate.
Yeah.
But no, please hit us up on social media and make your recommendations, as Andrew Craig did for our film today, Sucker Punch. Have Greg and Scott, have you guys seen this flick before? Like, was this your first time with it?
Oh, it was not my first time seeing this movie. Liam, you might recall, I want to say a season or two ago, I went on the record saying that I actually kind of like this movie. It's one of my favorite Zack Snyder movies, and I don't know if that is a very damning statement to say about what I think about the rest of his filmography. But
or what that says about you.
I think there's a lot that this movie has going for it. I enjoyed it when I saw it in theaters. I actually had not seen it again since it first came out, and I was concerned that I was remembering it more fondly than it perhaps deserved. But honestly, on the rewatch, I didn't hate it any more than I did the first time. I thought it was about the same and kind of enjoyed it. Weird guilty pleasure. And maybe it's because it's just a bonkers visual spectacle. I quite enjoy it. Just tickled my brain.
Yeah, that's fair. Greg, have you seen this before?
No. It's this movie for me is somewhat like The Eternals in that when a movie like that gets a bunch of bad reviews, I'm just like, oh, good, I don't have to go see it.
That's fair. So this weirdly, the reason I ask, I'm so hung up on have you seen it? I started watching this movie when it came out like on DVD and did not get all the way through it. So I've only seen the first half of it, and watching it again, I was like, I think I stopped watching it because I was confused, and that feeling continued on in the second viewing. Though at least I was able to, like, when all was said, I'm like, okay, I tracked, but I remember why I was confused by this movie and stopped watching it when it came out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can see getting frustrated with it.
I've heard people say this is one of those polarizing films where people either really like it or really hate it, and there's very little in between. And that tracks to me. I can see why a lot of people would be, as Greg put it, very frustrated by this movie. And obviously I'm one of the people who liked it, so I can also understand why someone would be like, that was awesome. I have no notes.
I went snooping for other, cinema discourse on it on the internet, articles and YouTube videos and what have you. And a lot of it was people being like, okay, hang on. I actually, here's a case for Sucker Punch. So I think it is, it's got its fans and its detractors. And I was poorly put myself in the middle of just, mostly confused.
I'm not willing to die on the hill for this movie. Sorry, Greg.
No worries. It's not like an irredeemable movie.
Hardcore baby doll stan. It's been said.
Yeah.
Sorry, Greg.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily irredeemable. I mean, there's lots of reasons to like and watch a movie, and sometimes it can be just all about spectacle, and that's enough. And that's could be the one thing you can't say about Zack Snyder is that he doesn't know how to direct action. It does get to the action bits, it's a pretty exciting movie. And I would actually say that probably the last 10 minutes to 15 minutes of this movie is pretty good. It just made me sort of frustrated that the rest of it wasn't quite as cohesive,
And I mean, number one, that could be because this movie famously is one of those Zack Snyder properties that's been hacked to bits and just cut right down to the bone. And I just want to say as well, part of the reason why the movie works as well as it does, I think might be because of the strength of the cast. There's a really good cast in this movie.
Yeah, let's hit the details here. Obviously directed by Zack Snyder of Snyderverse fame. I don't know what that means. You just wrote it in the notes.
Director of the Snyderverse.
That's not a thing. Anyway, whatever. Steve Shibuya, famous for being the additional cast and crew on Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So, cool.
He's done more than any of us.
Yeah, indeed. Stars Emily Browning as Baby Doll, Abby Cornish as Sweet Pea. We got Vanessa Hudgens, Jenna Malone, Jamie Chung, Carla
Gugino.
Thank you. Carla Gugino as Dr. Vera Gorski, and a young Oscar Isaacs, who I couldn't even pin until 20 minutes in. I was like, oh, damn, that's Oscar Isaacs.
He's very good at
that baby face. Yeah. He's a cutie.
Wow.
Yeah, let's go to the trailer and then get into it, because whoo boy, is there a lot to unpack.
You are safe. It's all safe. What you're imagining right now, that place can be as real as any pain. Don't be afraid. You have all the weapons you need. Your fight for survival starts right now.
I'm gonna escape from here. There's armed guards everywhere. If Blue finds out, we're dead. We're already dead.
This is your journey. If you succeed, it will set you free.
Baby Doll is accused by her abusive stepfather of intentionally murdering her sister, and he has her committed to a disreputable mental health facility. We're plunged into a different layer of reality where the institution is framed as a brothel, and Baby Doll makes 5 friends among the other girls. Together, they plot an escape, but to get out, they need a map, a lighter, a knife, and a key. Baby Doll dances to distract the men who hold these items and escapes into a further reality where she's a member of a badass team of lady commandos on fantastic adventures. Some of them die, one escapes, and Baby Doll ends up with a frontal lobotomy. The end.
Okay, Liam, I know that you're going to launch into something, but before you do, I think it's funny. Like Scott did a rewrite on the trailer summary before after I had written one, and I wish we had kept my original one around just to show you like the difference between someone who liked this movie and someone who didn't, because mine was extremely sarcastic and Scott's was more. I kind of want to watch this movie that Scott just described.
Yeah, and I think the difference here between the two, like what you were looking for and didn't get and what Scott got and loved, is that like this movie has a fairly simple plot. Perhaps Gregg would argue no plot.
It's pretty on the nose with its plot, yeah.
Yeah. It's just like to escape, she needs to get 4 items and then does so, and then someone escapes.
Yeah.
But it is, the cynical could say padded out. The generous or enthusiastic could say bookended by huge fantastical fight scenes that take up a good third of the movie, fighting robots and samurais and Nazi zombies and all that good stuff. But that is
World War I Germans. They are explicitly not Nazis.
The scene where Baby Doll learns about the items that she has to collect in order to escape, I felt like I was kind of watching like a Resident Evil interpretation, if there was like a tiny like puzzle box to solve or something like that, it would like fully on a video game or something like that. I think that was actually the point where the movie lost me, because it felt so simplistic and weird and out of nowhere that I was kind of like, okay, this is, yes. No, well, specifically, yes.
How he like gives her a bunch of weapons and then says, go find 4 more things. And then the 5th thing is a mystery. And also you will suffer a great loss because you're about to go through the hero's journey. And 2/3 of the way through the movie, we need to suffer ego death as per Campbell.
Look, again, the movie's precisely on the nose, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
He literally spells out the hero's journey in that first scene. He's like, I'm the goddess and I'm giving you gifts. It literally was said at the beginning that I'm a guardian angel, and go through these trials until you lose something, and you're going to come out the other side changed.
I think it's all at once, like on the nose and indecipherable. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, so again, I love the trifecta of didn't like it, loved it, and I've just got a lot of questions. Sure. So I'm going to start with my question is like, what did y'all like about this? Like what did we definitely enjoy? Because I liked the fight scenes, and I liked that they were immediate world building. It like, or not world building, but like, they don't have to provide context because it is meant to be tropey. I really liked. And then the fact that they're also good, fun, splashy action scenes. Those parts, the robot fighting parts, were sick, and I like them.
Yeah, no, for sure. The visual spectacle on display is right out of like a high octane anime or a comic book. It is an eyeful, and it's delightful to watch. Absolutely. I kind of like the brothel stuff. Is that wrong of me? Like, it's well presented. The actors are all like giving it 100%. I think the production design is really good. And like, I I buy it. And I buy it as someone trying to make their miserable situation in a corrupt mental institution seem less horrifying.
This is where I disagree, and this was my problem with it. So you brought it up. I'm sorry, but I just got it. I didn't fully understand, first of all, who was imagining this place as a brothel, because I was under the impression it was Sweet Pea. And so, like, all the fantasy dancing robot fight stuff was Baby Doll, but the brothel thing was Sweet Pea's way of internalizing and processing this trauma.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Liam. I think the reason that you're confused is that the visual language of the movie tells you that it's Baby Doll's dream, because it's focused on her when we transition to brothel, right?
Yeah,
but it's from Sweet Pea's perspective. I get that.
Yes, and I think that's it revealed at the end of the movie. And it's also reinforced. I happened to watch it with subtitles on, and the narrator at the beginning is Sweet Pea, because it literally has in brackets like Sweet Pea, and then because that subtitles will say who's saying it if they're off screen.
Yeah, subtitles are great for adding clarity to stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but even again on the internet, some people were unsure. Sorry,
but this could be, again, I mentioned at the top, this movie famously has been just hacked to the bone, and that, like, some of that context is almost certainly lost because of that. And I think maybe like a different cut of the movie, and I'll discuss different cuts as we get into the second half before we get into our changes. But I feel like that may have been lost along the way, and that a different cut might be able to be more clear about that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
but the existing film is unclear. Yes.
Yeah. And so there's that part of it, is like, I wasn't sure whose perspective was. But the other thing, and this was my major beef with it, because again, I loved all the action stuff. Putting women in literally a house for the mentally insane is all sorts of problematic. But whatever. Like, not whatever, but we'll get to it. The thing that I found very strange, and what I disagree with you, Scott, where you're like, I love the production design, I love it. This mental institution is obviously traumatic and scary, but it seems like sex trafficking brothel is like a lateral move at best.
I disagree a little bit, and I think it's because there's the perception that in the brothel they still have a little more agency that they lack in the mental institution. Like, they're still functional members of society. They're still able to, like, have a little bit of glamour in their lives, unlike just the miserable condition in the mental institution, where the best they can look forward to is the doctor comes one day and gives them a frontal lobotomy. Like,
yes. And then the other thing that added to some of my confusion is especially when, like, what made my hair go up when you said set design. There's parts of the brothel that I can't tell, are they, like, is she scrubbing the floors of a mental institution, or is she scrubbing the floors of a brothel? They both look equally shitty, and I was truly unsure if we're going back for the chef, right? When he's the brothel chef, he's got white chef robe on and a big chef hat. But when he's the mental institution chef, he's got a white robe on and a small chef's hat.
I mean,
and I'm like, I couldn't tell when we were looking at a brothel and when we were looking at a mental institution, and I kind of like, and again was like, but also that's like a lateral move. Like, imagine, Life is Beautiful, right? You know the movie Life is Beautiful, where he goes through trying to convince his son that they're not in a Nazi concentration camp. But imagine if he was like going around trying to convince me, like, oh no, we're just in a medieval dungeon, right? Or a Dickensian orphanage, or a screening of Sucker Punch, like somewhere equally terrible.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that you're correct that the two layers don't seem distinctive enough. And then, it certainly doesn't help that the chef is also the chef. Like, if you wanted to really hammer it home, the chef would be something else in the brothel. He'd be, I don't know, a stage manager or something like that. Or
not necessarily that, but I mean, one of the orderlies, the guy with the lighter, is recontextualized as the mayor.
The mayor.
So you could have done something different with the chef, I suppose. Yeah.
Exactly. So the chef should have been like a bartender, and when he's assaulting Rocket in the pantry, maybe it's like a fancy wine cellar. And this is kind of my note, my second half note, but like, maybe we see the difference between mental institution, pantry, and wine cellar. Like,
basically, one of your notes then being that maybe there should be more production value for the brothel. Make it more brothely.
Make it fancier. Make it more showgirlsy and less like equally desperate and sad as a mental institution.
Reasonable. It didn't go far enough. I guess that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. I see
the
that.
other way is make the mental institution
even
less
dingier.
Zack Snydery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see with the mental institution that there's kind of already an inherent prison quality to it because you're institutionalized, you're a danger to society, and you're not allowed to leave. So it doesn't necessarily need to be quite as dark and depressing. Like it might actually even be better if Oscar Isaacs is the only orderly who sucks, and the rest of them are just normal people, just trying to go about their job. Then then it becomes a more of a contrast when you get to the brothel, and it's the stakes are a little bit higher because they're in more danger, because this is more of like a crime syndicate or something like that that's keeping them inside the brothel or whatever. So that could add some extra contrast between those two layers, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was my big take, which made it suck because I was definitely on board for the let's pretend when she's dancing she's fighting robots. I was like, sick, this is fun as hell. But you're saying that's where we lost you, Greg, like at the samurai part even?
Well, yeah, because I think it's because there's a definite connection between the brothel and the mental institution, right? Like there are definitely things going on there that are like 1-to-1 between the two layers, right? But when we go to the third layer of the crazy cool action anime film, the 1-to-1 is completely lost. And not that I expect it to be like it's got to be more metaphorical, but there isn't one, at least as far as I interpreted. It's just like lots of action happens, and the only thing that the audience knows is happening in the so-called real world or the next layer down is that baby doll is dancing. So there's there's nothing fundamentally changing about what she's doing. I guess she's just dancing harder when the action goes up more. I don't know, like it's just that part of it just felt to me like you could lift those action scenes right out, and it took all the potential tension away from it. Like I'm not invested in anything that happens to baby doll in that layer because it doesn't fundamentally matter. Like the only thing I need to see at the end is like whether she won or lost in that particular dream, and that's it. That's all I need. So while the action was fun, it did not really it didn't work for me just because there's no stakes.
Counterpoint. You can't lift those out because they're the point of the movie.
Well, yes. Yeah. I mean, if you're fundamentally like not going to change the sort of hook of the film, then you can't take those out. But
because they are the hook of the film.
I feel like if you actually did take them out, then you would have kind of this. You would be left with a much different movie, like a much more, I don't know if it would be a much more standard kind of mental institution movie where there's someone's clearly, it would be more of like which one's the real reality, the brothel or is the mental institution the real reality, right? That kind of thing.
For the record, and this risks tiptoeing into changes territory. That's a solid suggestion in itself. If we saw a movie, and I'm not necessarily saying this would be my fix for this movie, but just as a premise for a movie where you have several different perspectives and the framing is 1-to-1, but it's questionable about who's really seeing reality. And you have a mental institution and a brothel and a prison maybe, and like a bunch of different, very similar, but and they're all bad enough where you're like, any one of them could be an escape. I don't know which one is real. That's the kind of
like Rashomon for daydreams kind of thing?
Like it would be interesting.
Would that be an accurate way?
for traumatic scenarios?
Yeah.
As a concept, that's a solid concept. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think it could have been fun. There's lots of ways to play with it. I think having one person think that they're going through a crazy action film is that's like a lot of fun and could be like actually an interesting sort of like comedic element, I guess, if you had a whole bunch of characters and the one person just thinks they're in an action film and you can see them in other layers like doing really weird stuff in the background, and it's because they think they're in that different place. I think that could be really interesting. But that's not this movie.
The real head fake would be then if that was the person who was seeing the real reality.
Yeah. That's the long con of this movie we're concocting.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep getting so hung up on details, but like, so is she dancing because she's a dancer in a bordello, or is she dancing because there is dance instruction at this mental institution?
I kind of got the impression that she wasn't dancing for the people in the mental institution.
Yeah, okay,
Ooh.
I starting to, that's the, yeah. I don't know, man. She's not actually dancing. Okay, so she's dancing because she's in a bordello, but then the dancing in the bordello is something different in the mental institution. That could be. I don't know. The dance studio looked like it could be in a mental institution.
I don't know that that's necessarily the case. That's the inference I was getting, that she was using something else to distract the men. And that it was being translated in the bordello reality as her amazing dancing skill.
Yeah, I actually, I'm starting to feel bad because like I think maybe I could have used an extra couple days to sort of let this movie percolate in my brain, because that does make a lot of sense, because they say the men are transfixed by her, like they're entranced.
Yeah.
But if she's being abused, when she's quote unquote dancing, then that sort of tracks.
Go get the lighter while I'm being abused makes more sense.
Yeah. And it also tracks with the reason why she escapes into just a complete fantasy reality, right?
Right.
Unless that's Sweet Pea's perspective, and then it's like, I love the idea of this movie. It's just so clumsily like presented.
Well, that's the thing is, like, before we started to record, and we did touch on some of this stuff, I asked, like, is this movie, like, smarter than I thought it was? And, maybe it speaks to more of what we were talking about earlier about how this movie has its defenders, and you can kind of see it. Like, there's a lot going on, and if you interpret things a little bit differently, then you can really pull a little bit more out of what's going on. Whether you like what you pull from it or not, it's an entirely different matter. But I want to be clear when I say smarter, I just mean in terms of like how it's interpreting its metaphors and things like that. I don't necessarily mean that the content of what it's presenting is smart. I just want to be very clear about that, because I know that like there's particularly at the end there's some pretty objectionable stuff that we'll probably talk about getting up in a second or two, I imagine.
I mean,
or I guess we could do it now, because
I was going to say, do we want to talk about the aspects of this that need to be unpacked? I mean, part of me was like, I thought it was going to be this like cringy, poor depiction of mental health, and aside from the fact that they just throw them in a quote unquote home for the mentally insane, which is not a chill turn of phrase, it doesn't really have much to say on like it doesn't depict mental health poorly, because it doesn't really depict mental health.
Not really.
It just depicts like trauma.
Yeah. And I mean, the implication is that
there's not that time.
No, the implication is that some of the other girls are there for the same reason Baby Doll is. They have been like put there by people who want them out of the way because Blue is disreputable and is willing to take bribes to keep them, right?
Yeah. So, like, do we need to unpack its, like, questionable depiction of mental health? Because I don't think there really is one. It's just, like, a sort of a crass vehicle to get us into a place where women are abused.
That seems to be the case, yep.
Yeah.
Cool and chill.
I know that there's definitely some consternation around John Hamm's, like, I think it's his one and only line in this movie, where he gives her a lobotomy and then he says, it's like she wanted me to do it. Which I think the context around the movie potentially being that, you know, she's being abused is kind of, like it's when I was watching it, the first thing that I was like wanting to like why would she want you to do it? Like why would you think that she wanted you to give her a lobotomy? Like that line just came out really flat, and sort of like I was already pretty frustrated with the movie, so I wasn't really interested in interpreting it further. I just thought like it was just a bad line. But I can also see how it's like it's definitely interpreted in a negative way in terms of like sexual assault and stuff like that, right? So
and the implication certainly that I read in it is that she was accepting the lobotomy because it was an escape. Like she would be released from all of the trauma and all of the terrible memories and the guilt about what happened with her sister, and like it would be gone. It's sweet oblivion. So she is kind of welcoming it. And I mean, I said we were going to touch on the alternate cuts later on. I suppose this is a good time to mention that the extended cut of the movie, which has been released, does add about 18 minutes of footage, and it includes a scene with the high roller in the brothel reality, which recontextualizes the end with the brain surgeon, in which he turns out to be a nice guy, and while he has purchased her services, he's unwilling to proceed without her consent. And she kind of like, it's implied, gives him the consent, and that translates back into him giving her the lobotomy and being like, oh, it's weird. It's like she wanted it. And it completely changes the tone of the ending because of that, right? An example of how a major cut from this movie completely changed it, right?
Yeah, it feels like there was a lot of pieces missing, hence some of my confusion. But I want to be clear to our listeners. I like movies that have like vague metaphors. Like I liked Arrival. I liked not fully understanding exactly what was going on in Arrival. Mm-hmm. This one was either needed to be more vague and metaphorical or less, but it was just kind of this weird halfway point. And I think some of the pieces missing that Scott's referring to might have given either that permission to interpret it as you will or clarity to interpret it a certain way. But as it is now, it's just sort of left like, you figure it out. Fuck you. We're missing parts.
Now, we've done a Snyder cut on this podcast, and there is allegedly a Snyder cut of Sucker Punch that is much longer and has never been released and is a musical. Like it has actual musical numbers. You see more of like baby doll dancing. Like it's apparently much, much longer too. And I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day, but it allegedly exists. Zack Snyder has said it exists, and I kind of want to see it. Like that is one Snyder cut. I definitely am like, I kind of want to see what his vision of this movie was before it got absolutely hacked to the bone.
Well, that sounds like a good place to throw to our friends at the Alberta Podcast Network, and we'll come back. We'll talk about exactly what we want to see changed about this, and I think we'll be back.
Looking for a way to give back? ATB Cares makes it easy for all Albertans to support the causes they care about. Donate to your favorite charity through ATB Cares, and ATB will match 20% of every dollar donated to eligible Alberta charities. To learn more and donate, visit atbcares.com.
Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. We're talking about Sucker Punch. Where to start, fellas? Where to start? I guess, Scott, I want to know your fix as someone who loves this movie unabashedly, 100%.
No, the movie is flawed. Putting words in my mouth.
It's in your top 10.
No. I think I rated this movie.
It's not, because I think I've heard your top 10 before.
I'm pretty sure I gave it 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, like, definitely a movie I liked, but I wouldn't call it in my top 10. I mean, I hadn't really considered it before, but honestly, Liam, in the last half, you mentioned that you wish there was a little stronger delineation between the mental institution and the brothel as layers of reality. And having sat on that for a couple minutes now, I actually strongly agree with that. I think that would have been an interesting change, and it would have made the differences between the two a little more stark. And I think I like that.
Yeah. Thank you. How did you see making that distinction? Because I actually had a couple different ways I thought I could go about it.
I kind of agree with your just like off the cuff remark that maybe the brothel should just be fancier. Like it should, like every aspect of it should just be nicer than, oh yeah, I can see how this is just a mental institution that has a coat of paint slapped on it. Like, as you said, like maybe instead of the stock room in the kitchen, it's like the wine cellar. Maybe instead of like the back hallway, like they're all sleeping in this like dormitory. Maybe that's gussied up a lot, like stuff like that. I agree.
Yeah. I was even thinking of like if it were to maybe cut back and forth, like you see it, you see Rocket being assaulted in a wine cooler, and then it's like almost like strobe lighty flashes where it's like, oh, actually, no, it's, you see the chef with the big hat, and then you see the chef with the small hat. And you're like, oh, it's the same guy, but different. Or like, well, he's got... And also, I think the chef should have been a different thing in the bordello
fair enough.
Fantasy.
I feel like, though, the real transition point should be whether or not we're seeing things through Sweet Pea's perspective or Baby Doll's perspective, maybe.
Yeah, and because that was not clear, and it trickles in through the movie. Like, I start wondering, like, well, who are these men? Like, who, I know it's like it's not the actual mayor of the town; it's the guy who works at the front desk with the lighter. But like, is he coming to do like mayor stuff? Like, I don't. It just it all bleeds through. Where I start. I'm not to the point where I was like relieved when it was robots, because I'm like, well, I know this is definitely in her imagination. Yeah.
I think that if I'm for my fix, I think one thing that we need to solve, and we were sort of going back and forth on this before we were recording, is who actually killed Baby Doll's sister, because there's an interpretation that Baby Doll accidentally kills her sister and therefore is committed to the mental institution, or that the abusive stepfather kills her and then blames the Baby Doll for the crime. Where do we kind of land on that? I think we might be a little bit divided.
Well, I certainly read it as Baby Doll accidentally kills her, because she shoots past her stepfather into the closet, and then when she rushes past him, her sister is bleeding. I interpreted that as she accidentally winged her sister, and her sister died. And that's part of the guilt she's carrying. That's why she doesn't want to talk about her past and why she's framing herself as an orphan. Like, it's because she's carrying the guilt of, oh my God, I killed my sister by accident while trying to defend her from my evil stepfather.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it as well. But thinking back on it, I can see how people, I think if the stepfather did it, and if that is the implication, he did it before she started firing or something.
Well, he would have had
to
have, yeah.
She was already bleeding when the gun fired or something.
And part of the reason why I think Baby Doll did it is because...
I do too.
Why would she have not killed her stepfather if he had killed her sister? Like, she was holding a gun to him to protect her. If she then found out he'd already done something terrible to her and that she was dying, it tracks to me that she would have wheeled around and shot him right there. Yeah. So the fact that she did it is the reason why she drops the gun and runs.
Drops the gun and runs away. Yeah. But I mean, again, the internet's divided. Like, people keep every Wikipedia summary you read is slightly different.
Yeah, I think thinking back on it now, like I think I'm probably a little bit more in agreement. Like, at the time when I watched it, I interpreted it as it was by the hand of her stepfather. But the more I think about it, the more I think that you guys are correct, which is good, because I mean it's better for the movie if that's the case, because that it's because it is a redemption arc, and it doesn't actually make as much sense if her stepfather had killed her sister, then there's not too much of a redemption there. Like, I guess you can interpret it as that she felt like she should have been able to protect her sister more. But if she goofed up and killed her sister, then there's a much better redemption arc. And I think it makes more sense that she's willing to sacrifice herself and her brain, apparently, to at the end, because
to escape that.
She's done something monstrous. She wants to forget about it. Yeah, that definitely tracks. I think for me, like, if that's the case, I think making her a bit more of a mysterious character would have been more fun to me. Like, perhaps instead of getting that whole drawn out intro of her sister's murder or accidental murder, we actually simply start with her being dragged into the mental institution, and we don't know why she's there.
Oh my God, Greg. No, it starts with her being taken into the brothel. And then it's slow. You peel back the layer partway through the movie, and it's revealed that it's actually a mental institution. And then you find out why she's there. Oh, head fake! I love it. Oh, I love that.
Great.
I think that could work really well. And then you can have, a nice. The way I sort of envision it is like the opening scene of her being dragged in is sort of like you're kind of in tight, and you can kind of make out what's going on between. And as we sort of like it, the close-ups sort of make you think it's one thing, and as you draw out, you can draw out into the imagination, right? So then it becomes a brothel as you I don't know. Just the idea that we don't fully understand who that character is, I think makes a lot more sense. And adding that air of mystery around her and starting in the movie with more imagination, I think definitely helps the audience understand what happens to her when she starts dancing. Because before, like, for me, one of the troubles I had with it is that she didn't seem like a particularly remarkable person. Like what happened to her was pretty. I'm going to say it's funny. I'm going to say what happened to her was straightforward when I misinterpreted it, but like it is fairly, that opening scene seemed fairly cut and dry. Like there was nothing, supernatural about it or dreamlike about it. I guess that's probably what I'm trying to get at, is like, it wasn't, it felt like reality. It didn't feel like a dream. Right. So you don't get the sense of like what her powers as a imaginative person or a dreamer are. So when she does start dancing and then she goes into this whole world, it's pretty jarring, it was hard for me to really get on board with where the movie wanted to go. So I think playing with that early on really makes it much easier for the audience to get drawn into her imagination and understanding what's going on inside her head. And then, as you say, Scott, as we peel back the layers, it can start to be a bit more clear that like the brothel is not actually Baby Doll's imagination, as someone else,
and not her imagination.
Yeah. I also like the idea that if we start with her being dragged into the bordello, the kindly but maybe overbearing madam is then revealed to be her therapist, who is telling her, you have, in the power of your imagination, you can make anything real. You can have the power you need, yada, yada, all the things she says that first time. If that is said when seconds after it's been revealed we're in a mental institution, that kind of also gives it a lot more weight. Like, oh, she was imagining the brothel to cope with the trauma. Okay. And then we go forward into robots. It's like you just amp up the like, she uses imagination to escape angle.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that better than the fix I was going to have. Because, like, Scott, I'm not going to say you took mine. You just agreed with the one I had pitched earlier. But
it was a good fix.
If we weren't going to make a clear distinction between the two, I was almost going to go to bat for just cut the brothel. Weird to say brothel fantasy. Again, I think it's very strange that they imagine a slightly less traumatic scenario instead. Like, but nevertheless, if you just cut the brothel thing entirely and just have these women in this fucked up institution, maybe it's Baby Doll, maybe it's all 5 of them. Like maybe each of those 5 vignettes of action are each one of their imagination. But then now that we've got the context that she's not dancing, she's being assaulted, that just kind of changes that. But, man, ew, now that I think about that from the first half, that all those action sequences are actually just her being assaulted, possibly, makes them less fun.
Yeah, it's,
I mean, the movie,
a bit of a downer.
The movie is not a little on the nose about its condemnation of like objectifying women, and Zack Snyder's even said like the movie is kind of giving the middle finger to the very kind of people who would like this movie on a surface level.
Yeah.
And
there's
like I get that. He's not being subtle about it.
Yeah, I've been trying to rattle around in my brain if there's a better, if the abuse angle is removable.
It's kind of baked in, honestly.
Yeah, feels a little bit. But then I'm trying to, and this just actually might be beyond my capacity as a male to be able to interpret properly. But like, is there a better way to use the abuse angle than as it's currently used? Because I'm just not certain that as written it says enough about
and
especially when it's put right next to big fantasy action scenes, like it. Sorry, Scott.
And this could be another example of something that's lost in the translation, right? Because there's huge chunks of this movie that were scooped out. And
could be, although I don't necessarily trust Zack Snyder's ability to.
That's fair.
That's not
you can do a lot of slow-mo shots in 18 extra minutes.
Yeah, I don't, and I'm not suggesting that Zack Snyder is a necessarily a bad guy. Like I just don't. I think he's a fine filmmaker, but I don't know that he's the most thoughtful one. If that's fair to say. So
maybe this is an example of subject matter being handled clumsily by people with good intentions, but not necessarily the toolbox to really do it justice. No pun intended. Snyder justice.
They're going to point out the irony that we're the 3 white dudes are talking about this too. Yeah. But like that's what I was going to say is like if the abuse and the assault is baked into it, maybe we don't need, like, maybe don't do that. Maybe don't have a fantasy action movie that is cannot be separated from like trauma and abuse to women without actually saying anything meaningful about it. Like maybe just don't do that.
Okay, I have a suggestion then for this movie. Yeah. Let a woman take a pass on the script after it's been written.
Yeah.
And maybe Zack Snyder doesn't direct it. Maybe he just produces it and passes it off to a woman director.
Yeah, or does all the style, like the visual, like all of his visual. Yeah,
maybe he works as cinematographer and hands it off to a woman to direct. And I get it. But like maybe with hindsight, that would have been a thing that they should have considered doing. Mm-hmm. Like it's based on the subject matter and the kind of movie that they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just let a woman have much more involvement in the creative process. Director.
And I mean, that might be fair to say about basically every movie.
Yeah, certainly a lot.
But like this one,
especially when they're
traffics so heavily in. Yeah. And also, as we learned from Charlie's Angels, doesn't necessarily, it's not women don't have all the answers to do nuanced takes on complicated issues.
Sure, so. Yeah, everyone's got bad takes, right? So who knows? Yeah. But like, I think with this one, like, it's got, I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me whether I'm off base here or not, but like, it's got that kind of rote, sort of like interpretation of feminism in it, where it's like, the girl power is like they do badass things, right? And maybe the action bits of it, like that part of the movie, like maybe you can still do that, but maybe it has to be darker and grittier to match the subject matter that the movie is tracking in.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or perhaps, like, my biggest problem with those scenes is that as I said off the top, like, there's not really any translation between them and the actual, and what's going on in the other layers of the film. So, if there's, like, there should be a much more clear villain going on in that layer, right? Rather than, like, cause my interpretation is, like, there's like 3 of those action vignettes, right? And, like, all 3 of them aren't really related. Like, they all kind of seem to take place in different fantasy universes. So,
I mean, they're
right, like,
they're clearly connected by the fact that the characters of the girls are the same in all 3 of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's, like, one is steampunk World War one is orcs in a fantasy castle and dragons, and one of them is robots on a fancy future train on the way to the fancy future city.
Yeah,
and I still love it. It's great. Like,
I just think I like, if that layer was a bit more linear and had a clear villain that could be the stand-in for Oscar Isaac.
Like if Blue also appeared on that level, maybe as, like, the German commander or something.
Yeah.
Or if they had, like, really made the dragon the mayor. Like, the dragon looks like the guy who's the mayor is the guy at the desk or something. Like,
yeah.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to say yes.
The head robot is the cook.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I buy it. I see where you're coming from.
I would have howled if they were like, if she was fighting like a giant robot cook. That would be amazing.
Well, no, but if it was like a heftier robot who had, like, the same body proportions as the cook. But basically that would answer your question earlier in the podcast, Greg, of there not being more of a 1-to-1 correlation between, because the institution and the bordello are so 1-to-1. It's weird that the third layer of fantasy is 1 to 6, and this would draw it a little bit closer so that you could make the connection a little better. I get where you're going with that.
Yeah. I might take the dancing angle out of it, to be honest with you. Like, I think the bordello layer kind of would work better as more of like a heist layer, and that the action layer is more of like an interpretation of that heist.
I mean,
right?
It is a heist layer. They're doing a heist. They're just using the dancing skill.
At the end, they're doing a heist. I guess they're.
But, like, Showgirls isn't about a heist. Like,
yeah, but the thing is, what bugs me is, like, in the bordello or brothel layer, like, all she's doing is doing a dance, and there's no running progress between those 2 layers. Like, I would like to see something happen on that action layer that actually affects what's happening in that lower layer, right? Because otherwise it's just action, then it stops, and then we go back to, like, what actually happened in the brothel, So if we get more of, like, a stand-in for their heisting stuff, then I don't know. It just doesn't. It's just not. I don't think that layer has any stakes to me. Like, it lifts right out, and you don't, like, I don't get any. There's no connection between them for me. Like, yes, okay, so they steal whatever it is. They steal a map, and then they actually steal a map but that's it. Like, nothing that Sweet Pea does.
Well, the dragon is the lighter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that, but, like, Sweet Pea, like, for example, when they're stealing the map, like, Sweet Pea actually disappears in that action scene, right? And then she just gets the map, and that's the end of it, right? Like, there's no, like, we don't really see her going through a process of stealing the map on the action layer, which is kind of my problem with it. It's actually Baby Doll, as I recall, that steals the map.
Well, to be fair, that is also Baby Doll's fantasy layer, right? So she's going to be the main character.
Yeah, I know, but, like, there's the connectivity just isn't, like, because otherwise I don't know why I'm watching those scenes. I guess you guys disagree. Like, I just don't think they work because of that.
I see where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree with you because, as I kind of implied earlier, the hook of the movie is these high-octane anime fantasy scenes. But I get where you're coming from. I think you're right. They could connect better to what's going on the other two layers.
Yeah, well, we as I suspected, a lot to unpack about this one. I think we've definitely found some solutions, but I think we could go on, but this podcast must end at some point. So,
again, I'd like to see what Snyder's final artistic vision on this is. This is one Snyder cut again that I'd like to see and see how it changes the movie, how it recontextualizes the movie, and maybe improves the movie. Like, we all liked the Snyder cut of Justice League better than the original Justice League.
Yeah. But then it makes me wonder, what is it about the way Zack Snyder makes movies that he's seems to be the only guy this happens to?
I don't think he's I don't think he's the only guy this happens to. I think he's the guy right now with enough clout to allow himself not the luxury.
It happens to, but just where it's let's flip it then. Why do they keep hiring him to do what he does and then come along and undermine him? And why does he keep letting them do that to him?
I mean, he's got a very stylistic film style, and I can see why a lot of producers might be like, I watched the director cut, the rough director cut of this movie, and I have no idea what's going on, and we're going to make some changes.
Or I can't sell this.
Yeah.
And then it's
or it's 4 hours long.
Yeah. Then don't hire him. Hire some guy that'll just do what you ask him to.
But then you don't get a Snydery film.
I was just thinking that this actually happened to Ridley Scott twice. Happened with Blade Runner and Kingdom of Heaven, which the director's cut is apparently way, way better than the theatrical release.
Actually, I have never seen Kingdom of Heaven, and I've been told the director's cut is very good, and I want to see it because
I do too. And I've been actually searching for it, and I cannot find it anywhere. Everyone seems to have the theatrical cut. So help us out, streaming services.
Well,
please.
There's an extended edition of this movie, and all three of us could only find the theatrical cut. So.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube too. In fact, that's why I thought I watched the extended version, because when I paused the YouTube download I got, I could see the thumbnail for extended cut in the vague background. I was like, am I watching extended cut? No, I'm not. Anyway. But yeah, so not only did we have our thoughts, but you had yours. Thank you to everyone who contributes by following us on Facebook and Twitter at I Have Some Notes, and on Instagram at I Have Some Note Pod. I Have Some Notes Pod. We will solicit your comments, read them on air, like I'm about to now. Chris says it's totally unrealistic that Rosebud is just a sled. I think, chapped, that we, down to a narrow margin, down to one vote from my girlfriend, we did Sucker Punch.
Look, listen. The change to Citizen Kane is to have the nurse in the room to hear him say his last words so that there's not a giant plot hole that ruins the entire movie. Boom! Fixed it. Moving on.
Yeah. Which, again, I have to feel like someone else, that can't be, is that a Scott OG notion, or has that been discussed?
Oh, no, I'm 100% certain someone else has suggested that in the past.
Exactly, yeah, which is why we're not going to talk about this. It's been done. There's guys in the 50s on a ham radio doing exactly what we did. It's been...
There's 3 guys screaming into a ham radio.
A newsletter in the 70s.
I'm going to print my
radio station in the 90s.
I'm going to print up a mimeograph.
Fucking podcast nerds have been discussing Citizen Kane for 80 years.
I like that you said, Scott, that they were screaming into a ham radio, because that makes it sound even weirder. It's 3 nerds in the 50s just trying to get their thoughts heard by screaming the opposite way into a radio. I love it.
Yeah, I guess we're at I Have Some Notes on Twitter, but what's our ham radio frequency? Anyway, Christy Foley says, this movie lives rent-free in my head, and I hate it. Can the main character have some agency? Any agency? At all?
I mean, she comes up with a plan to escape the institution and executes it.
Does she, though? Because isn't that Stick from... what's his... Daredevil's isn't it his plan?
No, I mean,
I guess
you can see her as she's being led into the institution. She makes a note of the map, and she makes a note of the lighter, and she makes a note of the knife, and she makes a note of the key, and then later on she's like, I have a plan to get out. It's recontextualized as the wise sensei giving her this in her fantasy, but she puts it together herself. I mean, ultimately she fails to get out, but she does get someone out. So I'm saying I don't think she has no agency. She finds agency in a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at the recontextualized ending that the extended edition has, she also has some agency in deciding to go through with the lobotomy. Like, she wants it.
Yeah, I think I remember thinking about this yesterday, because when I saw this comment, I dwelled on it for a little bit, and I thought about her. Okay, so you are right that she comes up with a plan, but like the execution of that plan, I don't think she personally collects any of the items, right?
No, but she's facilitating the collection of them with her dancing. I'm using quotations. And I mean, I guess then it's open to interpretation. Yes. She also stabs Blue. The men in the film are constantly trying to take the agency away from her, and she keeps finding ways to have it and to use her power over them to help facilitate this plan. And I mean, that's kudos to her. She makes the best of a terrible situation. I don't think she has no agency. I don't read it like that. And maybe it's because I'm a dude.
Agree.
I don't know, but that's certainly not how I read the movie.
Yeah, it's very male gazy, but that's not the same as no agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go on after this podcast and keep ruminating about that. But I don't know.
And again, I'm not a woman watching this movie. I'm a dude. I could be misinterpreting it, and I'm willing to lay that out. But I read Baby Doll in particular as having agency because she comes up with the plan. She's the one who motivates the other girls to go through with it. She's the one who uses her skills to distract the people so that the other girls can get the stuff. She stabs Blue, like we pointed that out. Yeah. And in the end, she invites the lobotomy. That's not to me, that doesn't read as a character with no agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Danica LeBlanc comments, liked this one much more than originally planned. It's a mess, but it's a stylistic mess.
It is. It's a beautiful mess. It's like a Pollock painting. It's a beautiful mess.
In that vein, Andrew Craig, the person who suggested this one, had a similar comment. It's a great movie to have on in the background. The visuals are amazing, but the story is meh. There's a director's cut that I haven't seen. Maybe it's better.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the extended edition, apparently, we've talked about it, and I want to see that Snyder cut of Sucker Punch. I want to see it real bad. Zack Snyder, I know you're a big fan of the podcast. You're listening right now. You're taking notes. Mail it to us. Send us that Snyder cut of Sucker Punch. We want to watch it. We will talk about it.
You just send it to Scott. It's fine.
I'll tell you what. Send it to me. I'll watch it. If it's good, I'll let you guys see it too. But it is not for you. It's for me.
Because that was actually kind of my problem going into this. Was I'm like, man, I don't know how much I want to engage with this movie. Obviously, a lot I had a good time, but part of me is like, man, unpacking its weird presentation and questionable all of it. I'm like, is robot fighting worth it? And I think
yes.
For a podcast it is. In life, I don't know, but anyway.
I mean, I've watched a lot of miserable movies for this podcast. This was not one of them.
Fair.
Yeah.
Herman from the Modern Manhood podcast says, this movie was a mess and it should have just been a music video. The only good thing was this was the first time I saw Oscar Isaac.
Also the first time I saw Oscar Isaac, and you know what? I was like, that guy's going to be a star. I was correct.
Yeah, he's very good. I think the movie's a lot better whenever he's on screen.
Oh, 100%. And I mean,
I think that's why the ending
was
so much better for me, because it's a lot of meaty stuff with him.
I mean, and that's selling the rest of the cast short, because again, I think everyone's giving 100% in this movie, and it's just Oscar Isaac giving 100% is about 50% more than the average person can give. So,
Tony over at Flicks X-Rayed says, all the dream sequences are awesome, but the story tying them all together is beyond weak.
I mean, we mentioned it's pretty on the nose.
Yeah. At I Hate Your Taste says, a new script, a better writer. I don't even know how to salvage this one. Yeah, I think a new script from a better writer that might be a woman might be the way to do that.
That's what I suggested, yeah.
Film Gamer 1 says, have someone else who's a good writer write it.
Ooh, a lot of hate for this script.
I think we mentioned off the top that the writer Steve Shibuya he was mostly in Cruise, but not necessarily. This is his one and only writing credit. And I did do some research on him. He's an old film school classmate of Zack Snyder. They were buddies. I guess they spent about 10 years kind of off and on working on Sucker Punch. The original sort of concept was Zack Snyder's, and then Steve Shibuya did the first draft, and then Zack did rewrites on that draft. But he did give Steve, the sole credit, writing credit, which was generous of him, which is pretty cool to give his old buddy a full screen credit on the movie. So, but I did read an interview with him, and there was several illuminating things, and one of them was that they had the name for the movie before they ever wrote a draft of the script, which made a lot of sense to me, because I at the end of this movie I was like, why is this called Sucker Punch exactly?
Yeah. Yeah. That was also a question I had throughout that I'm like, we don't have time for why is it called Sucker Punch? It just is. It just is. That's not the biggest concern right now. Big C says, I remember this one, and not fondly. It was rough to say the least. Story was a mess. The sequences where the girls were trying to steal stuff, fuzzy on the details, it was years ago, didn't make sense when you remember they're in this other building.
I mean, it's meant to be a little hand-wavy, admittedly. There's a reason why we don't see Baby Doll's actual dancing. Because it just wouldn't translate very well. It's best left to our imagination. Yeah. Though, again, the Snyder version might have more actual dancing and music, apparently. So,
yeah, I would have liked to have seen her dance. I don't know. It might have sold the idea that she's putting the men into the trance a little bit better. I don't know. Doing some dancing, then transit. I don't know. I think it just might have been an easier transition for me. And the more connective tissues, which is obviously what I've been banging on about this whole podcast.
Mm-hmm. Friend of the show, Olav Rockney, says, allow Sweet Pea, I think that was her name, to liberate herself without the help of a man. The costuming male gaziness of the imagery undermines its attempt at empowerment, so tone down the TNA shots. A little more clarity about the mundane layer of reality might help too. That's what I said, Olaf. This movie is closer to being good than most people realize, because 10% of it is so terrible that it overshadows the 70% that's pretty decent.
I mean, yeah, we've sunk our teeth into it a little bit, discussing interpretations and the way things can be read. So there's definitely something there.
I think any movie that leaves you with something is not valueless, right? Like it's I'd rather watch a flawed movie that left me thinking than a flawed movie that didn't.
Yeah, that's fair. But I'd also rather watch a good movie that left me thinking.
I mean, cards on the table, yes.
Colin McIntyre says the only thing wrong with Sucker Punch is that there is no Sucker Punch cinematic universe.
I mean, there's not many other characters, really, at the end of this movie who are still around.
Yeah, most of them are dead or lobotomized.
Yeah.
So. Cool.
It's just a movie about John Hamm going from institution to institution giving lobotomies? What? No, that would be a terrible movie.
Hammering metal spikes into people's eyes.
That'd be a terrible film.
It's funny that like we had a lot of. I can always tell when a particular show is going to be popular because we get a ton of responses on it, and we had a lot of former guests giving us their thoughts on this one, and even our former hosts. So yeah, it definitely sparked people's imagination, whether you like the film or not. Sucker Punch has got something going on.
It's got something going on indeed, but that's gonna be it for today from us. Thank you, everyone. Again, please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but also wherever it is you're listening to this, whatever app, whatever service, it's probably got some kind of subscribe button. It's probably got some kind of review button. It's probably got some sort of clicky the thinger situation. So please do that, right? Or write us a review or whatever. We appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, we just watched a movie where a lot of men are terrible. Would you like to learn more about how men cannot be terrible? Well, you can check out fellow Alberta Podcast Network member Modern Manhood. It's great. You can find it right now, along with all the other member podcasts at albertapodcastnetwork.com.
That was a very lovely tie-in, Scott. Tune in 2 weeks from now, and we will be doing Kingsman: The Golden Circle.
That's the sequel movie, isn't it?
That's the sequel.
Oh, boy. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, boy. Oh, geez. I gotta watch 2 Kingsman movies now? All right. That's right, I haven't seen either. I'm looking forward to it. But until then, I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hi, friends. Caitlin
and Shanika here from Get Checkered.
We are your favorite female co-hosted Formula One podcast based out of Calgary, Alberta.
Join us weekly as we share our hot takes on the Formula One world with a little bit of sass.
Catch the podcast on any streaming service by searching Get Checkered.
Whether you're a casual fan or an enthusiast,
we hope you enjoy the ride.